The gold bars arriving at the Swiss bank in 1945 were unlike any others. They bore the eagle and swastika of the Third Reich, but many were also stamped with numbers from concentration camps, the last traces of jewelry and dental work stripped from Holocaust victims. The banker's dilemma wasn't ethical, but practical. Accept this tainted wealth and process it through neutral channels, or question the source and risk Switzerland's entire financial relationship with what remained of Nazi Germany. This moment captures the central paradox of Swiss neutrality. While Europe burned, Switzerland didn't just avoid the flames, it became indispensable to financing the fire. This isn't a story about avoiding conflict, but about mastering the business of conflict itself. To understand how a landlocked nation of mountains built a financial empire without firing a shot, we need to go back to where this system began, not with peaceful ideals, but with military catastrophe. The invention of neutrality, survival strategy to business model. For centuries, Switzerland's primary export wasn't chocolate or watches. It was soldiers. Swiss mercenaries formed the backbone of European armies, their reputation for loyalty making them the most sought-after fighters on the continent. These men weren't fighting for ideology, but for payment, establishing an early pattern of transactional relationships that would define Switzerland's economic future. Then came the Battle of Marignano in 1515. The Swiss suffered a catastrophic defeat against French forces, losing nearly half their army in a single day. The military reality became unbearable. They couldn't win against Europe's major powers. This wasn't just a tactical loss, it was an existential crisis that forced a complete rethinking of national strategy. What emerged wasn't moral neutrality, but military pragmatism. If they couldn't defeat the great powers, they would service them. Switzerland shifted from selling soldiers to selling financial services, becoming bankers to all sides in every European conflict. The same mercenary mindset, serving whoever paid, transferred seamlessly from the battlefield to the banking hall. They developed early financial innovations, processing war debts, facilitating cross-border payments for enemies, and storing wealth for aristocrats who might need to flee their own countries. The survival tactic of not taking sides became the foundation for unprecedented wealth accumulation. Swiss bankers discovered they could profit more from financing wars than fighting in them. The Swiss discovered something revolutionary. In war, the real power isn't necessarily who wins the battles, but who controls the money flowing between them. This insight would shape their national identity for the next 5 centuries. While other nations expanded through conquest, Switzerland expanded through financial infrastructure, creating an empire of influence rather than territory. This system required meticulous balance. Swiss bankers had to maintain relationships with all sides while appearing neutral to all. They developed a reputation for discretion that became their most valuable asset. When French aristocrats needed to hide wealth from revolutionary governments, when Italian merchants needed to move money across warring city-states, when European powers needed to finance armies without alerting their enemies, they all turned to Swiss intermediaries. The transition wasn't immediate or complete. Swiss mercenaries continued serving foreign powers for centuries, but the financial services industry grew alongside them. By the 18th century, Geneva had become the banking capital of Protestant Europe, while Zurich served Catholic interests. The division wasn't ideological, it was market segmentation, another early innovation in Swiss financial thinking. What began as military necessity evolved into economic genius. Switzerland had stumbled upon the perfect business model for a small, landlocked nation, become the indispensable intermediary in a conflicted world. The stage was set for the system's ultimate test, when Europe descended into total war in the 20th century. Perfecting the profit formula. The First World War became Switzerland's testing ground for modern financial neutrality. While Europe descended into trench warfare that would claim millions of lives, Swiss banks positioned themselves as the essential financial intermediary for both the Allied and Central Powers. This wasn't passive neutrality, it was active participation in the war economy from a protected position. They handled transactions that would have been impossible between warring nations, profiting from currency exchange, war loans, and international settlements. The Swiss franc became the stable currency in a continent of collapsing monetary systems. While French francs and German marks fluctuated wildly based on battlefield outcomes, the Swiss franc maintained its value, becoming the preferred currency for international trade and capital flight. Amid this chaos, Switzerland passed the Banking Act of 1934, the legislation that created modern banking secrecy. Presented as protecting German Jews from Nazi persecution, it equally protected the assets of Nazis themselves and any European elite seeking to hide wealth. The timing was strategic. As political tensions mounted across Europe, Switzerland positioned itself as the safe haven for all threatened capital, regardless of its origins. Flight capital poured in from frightened aristocrats, industrialists, and politicians across Europe. Switzerland became the continent's secured vault just as the entire system was collapsing around it. French industrialists fearing communism, German Jews escaping persecution, British investors seeking stability, all found their way to Swiss banks. The banks didn't ask moral questions, they asked about collateral and confidentiality. The mechanisms perfected during the Great War, financial intermediation, absolute secrecy, and servicing all sides without moral distinction, would face their ultimate test with the rise of the Third Reich. The laboratory experiments were over. The real application was about to begin. Swiss neutrality during World War I established patterns that would define its economic model for the next century. They learned that political instability elsewhere created opportunities at home. They discovered that financial discretion could be more valuable than military power. Most importantly, they proved that a small nation could exert enormous influence by positioning itself as the neutral ground in global conflicts. The system worked so effectively that when World War approached, Switzerland didn't need to reinvent its approach. It simply scaled up the existing model. The same bankers who had handled transactions between France and Germany now prepared to service the Allies and Axis powers simultaneously. The infrastructure was in place, the legal protections were established, and the moral framework of profitable neutrality was firmly entrenched. What began as a survival strategy had become a highly sophisticated economic machine. Switzerland had transformed itself from a nation of mercenaries into a nation of bankers with the same fundamental principle: serve whoever pays, ask no ideological questions, and maintain absolute discretion. The stage was set for the system's most controversial chapter, the handling of Nazi gold and the financing of Hitler's war machine. Neutrality's darkest chapter. The system faced its ultimate test in 1939. As Nazi Germany began its march across Europe, it needed to finance a global war but faced a critical problem. It was running out of gold. The solution ran directly through Swiss banking halls, creating a financial pipeline that would keep the Nazi war machine operational long after its own resources should have been exhausted. What followed was a highly sophisticated financial operation. The Reichsbank would melt down looted gold, stolen from national banks in occupied countries like Belgium and the Netherlands, and even from Holocaust victims, and recast it into new bars. These bars were then shipped to Switzerland, where the Swiss National Bank accepted them as legitimate assets, providing the Nazis with desperately needed Swiss francs to purchase crucial war materials from neutral countries. The Swiss knew the gold was looted. Their own intelligence services reported on Nazi plundering, but maintained the fiction of plausible deniability. This wasn't a covert operation, but an official arrangement. The clearing mechanism was the Bank for International Settlements in Basel, a supposedly neutral institution whose board included both Allied and Axis bankers. Through this system, the Allies themselves inadvertently financed aspects of the Nazi war machine, with transactions cleared through Swiss neutrality. American dollars paid for Portuguese tungsten ended up funding German arms production, all filtered through Swiss financial institutions that profited at every step. The moral compartmentalization was breathtaking. Swiss banks accepted gold from Holocaust victims and their perpetrators simultaneously. They provided financial services to Jewish families trying to protect their assets while simultaneously handling the wealth of senior SS officers. The justification was always the same: neutrality required serving all parties equally. Bankers developed a professional detachment that mirrored their mercenary ancestors. They were providing a service, not making moral judgments. When the war ended, the scale of collaboration emerged. Allied investigators found that Switzerland had accepted approximately $400 million in Nazi gold, equivalent to nearly $6 billion today. The 1946 Washington Accord forced Switzerland to return a fraction of this amount, but most of the gold remained, having been successfully integrated into the Swiss financial system. The post-war confrontation revealed the system's true nature. Swiss officials claimed ignorance about the origins of the gold, despite overwhelming evidence. The myth of not knowing became as important as the practice itself. Rather than ending these controversial practices, the post-war era simply saw them rebranded and refined for a new global order. The same financial infrastructure that had serviced the Nazis would now pivot to serve both sides in the Cold War, proving that the business model was adaptable to any ideological conflict. Secret money goes global. As the Iron Curtain descended across Europe, Switzerland discovered an even more profitable paradox. It could position itself as neutral ground for both sides in the Cold War. The same financial machinery that had serviced the Nazis now became indispensable to both American intelligence operations and Soviet capital flight. The ideological battle between capitalism and communism created new opportunities for those willing to serve all masters. The CIA used Swiss banks to funnel money to anti-communist operations across Europe, while the KGB used those same institutions to move funds for communist parties in Italy and France. Swiss bankers didn't ask ideological questions, they asked about collateral and confidentiality. This period saw the perfection of numbered accounts and legal protections that made Swiss banking the global standard for secrecy. The system became so sophisticated that intelligence agencies on both sides relied on Swiss discretion, creating the bizarre situation where American and Soviet operatives might unknowingly use the same bank, handled by the same discreet banker. As former colonies gained independence across Africa and Asia, new dictators discovered Swiss banks were the perfect place to stash national wealth. Mobutu Sese Seko of Zaire, Ferdinand Marcos of the Philippines, and the Shah of Iran all parked fortunes in Zurich and Geneva, their wealth protected by Swiss legal neutrality. The pattern established with European aristocrats continued with post-colonial strongmen. Switzerland would safeguard any wealth, regardless of how it was obtained or whose people were being impoverished in the process. Simultaneously, Switzerland developed another crucial arm of its empire: commodity trading. Neutrality provided the perfect cover for handling oil, grains, and minerals from conflict zones. Companies like Mark Rich Plusco, later Glencore, pioneered the art of trading with pariah states, using Swiss neutrality to bypass international sanctions. The tiny canton of Zug became the epicenter of this new global trade, offering minimal taxes and maximum discretion. Here, commodity traders could arrange deals between warring nations, ship sanctioned oil, and finance rebellions, all under the protective cloak of Swiss neutrality. When the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, many predicted the end of Swiss financial dominance. Instead, the opposite occurred. The collapse of the Soviet Union unleashed a flood of capital flight as oligarchs moved billions out of Russia. Newly wealthy elites from China, the Middle East, and Latin America all sought the security of Swiss banks. The system hadn't ended with the Cold War. It had globalized. Swiss neutrality had evolved from a military survival strategy into a financial business model that transcended ideologies and borders. The stage was set for the modern incarnation of this empire, where the rules would change, but the fundamental principles of profitable neutrality would remain intact. Sanctions, secrecy, and global capital. The fall of the Soviet Union didn't diminish Swiss financial power. It transformed it. Today, Switzerland's empire operates through three interconnected channels that have made neutrality more profitable than ever, even as the world demands greater transparency. 5 trillion in foreign assets. The modern version of banking secrecy isn't about numbered accounts, but sophisticated legal structures, trusts, foundations, and holding companies that provide the same opacity through complexity rather than outright secrecy. Wealthy individuals from emerging economies, particularly China and the Gulf states, now comprise the core clientele, seeking not just discretion but political stability for their fortunes. Second is Switzerland's role as global arbiter of sanctioned wealth. When the West imposed sanctions on Russian oligarchs following the invasion of Ukraine, an estimated $200 billion in Russian private wealth was already safely parked in Switzerland. The neutral handling of these assets, freezing but not confiscating them, demonstrates the continued balancing act. Switzerland freezes assets to comply with international law, but the underlying principle remains: your money is safe here, regardless of political winds. This creates the ultimate hedge for global elites. Their wealth survives regime changes and international condemnation. The third pillar is perhaps the most opaque: the physical gold trade. Switzerland refines about 70% of the world's gold, much of it arriving from conflict zones and authoritarian regimes. Gold from Russian mines, African war zones, and South American cartels flows through Swiss refineries, where it's melted down and recast, just like the Nazi gold bars of 1945, emerging with new, clean Swiss certification. This system provides deniability while maintaining Switzerland's position at the center of global value storage. The modern empire has learned to operate within the letter of international law while preserving the spirit of profitable neutrality that has served it for centuries. Digital age pressures. But the digital age has introduced pressures this system never faced before. In 2008, the United States charged UBS with helping American citizens evade taxes, forcing Switzerland to accept automatic information exchange with dozens of countries. The era of absolute secrecy was over, and Swiss banks faced a fundamental choice: adapt or become irrelevant. The 2016 Panama Papers revealed how Swiss lawyers and financial advisors were still at the center of global tax avoidance networks. While the banks themselves were somewhat cleaner, the knowledge and infrastructure had simply moved to more discreet channels. The scandal demonstrated that the demand for financial opacity remained strong, even as the traditional banking system came under scrutiny. European Union regulators have increasingly treated Swiss neutrality as a threat rather than a virtue. Bilateral agreements have forced greater transparency, while the ethical investment movement has created generational pressure. Younger Swiss bankers increasingly question the neutral at any cost model that served their predecessors. They face a world where environmental, social, and governance criteria matter to clients, making the old model of accepting any wealth increasingly untenable. The fundamental challenge is whether the Swiss model can survive in an era of transparent capitalism. When every transaction leaves a digital footprint and international cooperation is the norm, can a nation built on financial discretion maintain its edge? The cracks are appearing, but the vault hasn't broken. Swiss banks have adapted by focusing on legitimate wealth management rather than outright secrecy. They've become experts in navigating the narrow space between complete transparency and absolute discretion, the modern version of their historical balancing act between warring powers. The price of neutrality. The enduring legacy of Swiss neutrality isn't about peace. It's about proving that financial power can transcend military power. For 5 centuries, Switzerland demonstrated that you can build an empire without controlling territory, simply by controlling the money that moves between empires. But this prosperity came with profound human costs, from the mercenaries who died in the foreign wars to the Holocaust victims whose wealth was processed through neutral channels. The system operated on a fundamental trade-off: immense financial stability in exchange for moral flexibility. Today, as we face interconnected global crises from climate change to pandemics, the Swiss experiment raises a crucial question. In a world where problems cross all borders, can any nation truly be neutral? Or does neutrality itself become a form of complicity? The patterns continue in modern tax havens and financial secrecy jurisdictions. If you want to see how this Swiss model has been exported globally, watch our next video on how small nations are using these same principles today. Please support our channel with a like and follow Finance Rewind for more critical analysis of the hidden architecture of global finance.